I'm Mike, this is Mike on Media. Today I'm taking a look at the final episode of The Sopranos. The HBO show The Sopranos premiered on January 10th, 1999. After 85 preceding episodes, including an extended sixth and final season, the finale of the show was broadcast on June 10th, 2007. Nearly 12 million viewers watched the initial broadcast of the final episode, Made in America. During its 8.5-year run, The Sopranos won a plethora of awards and redefined what was possible in terms of modern television drama. Numerous critics and media organizations have crowned The Sopranos the best television show in history. But one aspect of the show continues to fuel ongoing interest: the ambiguous ending of the final episode where the screen abruptly cuts to black. When originally aired, the extended black screen was so unexpected that many viewers thought there was a problem with their television or cable company. More importantly, most people were confused about what the ending meant in terms of Tony Soprano. Was he alive? Was he dead? People wanted closure, but all they got were more unanswered questions. For his part, show creator David Chase has refused to explain the ending in any meaningful way, a position that, I suggest, should surprise no one. Even if he had, it wouldn't matter that much. Any comment that an artist makes about their art should be taken with a healthy dose of skepticism. Yet, there is one comment Chase made that's worth mentioning. Anybody who wants to watch it, it's all there. Indeed, it is all there. In this video, I'm going to do a detailed breakdown of the final episode of The Sopranos. By the end of this video, you'll understand why I believe Tony is dead, Carmela and AJ are also dead, Meadow lives, Patsy Parisi betrayed Tony, AJ unwittingly facilitated the murders, and Rhiannon was an unwitting accomplice. Additionally, there's a lot of other meaningful information we can glean from the episode. But before diving into the analysis, I'd like to briefly review the key storytelling devices that are often present in works of fiction. Many of you probably already know this, but I want to make sure everyone is on the same page. These techniques include foreshadowing, when words or actions refer to future story development; dramatic irony, which is when the dialogue has meaning to the audience beyond what it means to the characters; symbolism, when objects or actions represent other objects, actions, or concepts; meaningful music, which involves some aspect of the selected music, such as the title, lyrics, etc., being meaningful to the story. Interestingly, Chase has even commented on the role of music in The Sopranos' writing process.
And lyrics are just another form of dialogue, if you want to put it that way. It's a Greek chorus,
And finally, meaningful character naming, which happens when a character's name has some meaning related to the character. We'll see examples of all these techniques in this breakdown. Now, let's get into it. The final season of The Sopranos is unique in that it consisted of 21 episodes instead of the standard 13. When originally released, the season was divided into two parts, with part 1 including episodes 1 through 12, and part 2 episodes 13 through 21. There is foreshadowing of the finale in all part 2 episodes. This fact alone highlights how much planning went into the long-term development of The Sopranos. While it's beyond the scope of this video to identify all such examples, I will touch on the most important story points that are directly related to the final episode. The first notable scene is Tony and Bobby on a boat discussing what it's probably like to get shot. This scene is from episode 13, the first installment of part 2, Soprano Home Movies.
Our line of work, it's always out there. You probably don't even hear it when it happens, right?
There's your friend in there, on the wall.
Later, in the final moments of the next to last episode, The Blue Comet, Tony recalls the same conversation.
You probably don't even hear it when it happens, right?
There's your friend in there, on the wall.
Developing a similar idea, in episode 14, stage 5, the audio cuts out just as Gerry Torciano is murdered while sitting across from Silvio.
Giovesi, we had quattro gatti. Tonight you...
Silvio escapes and describes the experience by saying,
The fucking scary thing was, I didn't know what happened until after the shot was fired.
Between these two events and the two subsequent references to them, we have clear evidence of the writers developing the idea that when you get shot, there's a good likelihood that you won't even notice it before it happens. This point, of course, is already foreshadowing the abrupt cut to black ending of the finale. The Blue Comet has another important scene where Silvio explains to Tony why he needed to murder Bert.
Bert let me know the other night. He's been playing both sides of the fence with New York.
Bert?
Bert wasn't speaking for just himself.
The key point here is that Bert wasn't speaking for just himself. The implication is that there are other guys in Tony's employ who are either already playing both sides of the fence with New York or are sympathetic to new management. Likely, Patsy Parisi is one of these people. Finally, Patsy is present during the assassination attempt on Silvio. Patsy appears to have narrowly escaped with his life, which may well factor into the calculations that he makes going forward. With this background established, let's move on to the final episode. As others have pointed out, the opening overhead shot of Tony lying in bed looks very similar to what he would look like lying in a coffin. And the organ music from You Keep Me Hanging On by Vanilla Fudge is clearly reminiscent of a funeral. In the next scene, Tony and Paulie are waiting to meet up with Agent Harris. After Paulie complains, Tony tells him to enjoy the music. In other words, Chase is saying to the audience, listen to the music. It's somehow meaningful. The song on the radio is called Denise. It was released by Randy and the Rainbows in 1963. Of note, when the scene cuts to Tony leaving the car, the song ends on the lyric, "And I'm in heaven." Now, one could argue whether Tony would end up in heaven or in hell, but regardless, the lyric is almost certainly hinting at Tony's impending death. Soon after, Tony returns to the safe house where Carmela, AJ, and sometimes Meadow are hiding out. This scene seems rather inconsequential, but it's really important. First off, Tony is peeling an orange. Many people have theorized that oranges were used to symbolize violence or murder in The Godfather, epitomized by Vito buying and knocking over oranges during his assassination attempt. The Sopranos has already embraced this symbolism by having Tony buying orange juice and having it shot out during his first assassination attempt. Knowing what happens in the rest of the episode, we can interpret the fact that Tony is peeling an orange as an indication that something about this scene is relevant to Tony's impending assassination. Perfectly consistent with this interpretation, Carmela starts asking Tony if he's being careful. As soon as she raises the question, the conversation is interrupted by AJ and Rhiannon coming down the stairs. This is clear symbolism. The question of Tony being sufficiently careful in terms of not being murdered is interrupted by AJ and Rhiannon, both of whom will play a role in the later assassination. Carmela rightly points out that the arrangement bothers her, while Tony downplays it, saying, "Who's she gonna tell?" This is definite dramatic irony because Rhiannon later will be the source of the Sopranos family dinner location at Holsten's. For reasons of context, the next line is one of the most interesting ones in the entire episode. Exactly what Tony is saying is a little hard to make out because he mumbles a bit. Thankfully, we have the HBO captions which inform us that he's saying, "I wouldn't kick her out of bed for Purging Cookies." For quite a while after the episode originally aired, I took the caption at face value and didn't think much about the line. Later, however, when I purchased the Sopranos Season 6 Part 2 DVD box set, I was surprised to learn that it had a different and undoubtedly correct caption for the line. Specifically, that caption read, "I wouldn't kick her out of bed for Purging Cookies." This correction makes a lot of sense. Rhiannon reconnected with AJ in a mental health treatment center where she was dealing with food issues. But more than that, the correction is significant because it makes the line much more important. While Purging Cookies is understandable in a literal sense, it's also a well-known internet phrase that refers to the practice of deleting internet cookies, unique values that are passed from web servers to client browsers in order to track user activity. Purging cookies is a security precaution that some people take in order to reduce the extent to which they can be tracked. So, we have the security-based phrase that's being associated with Rhiannon. The question that this phrase raises is, who in the Sopranos cast of characters has experience and expertise with the internet? The answer? Jason Parisi. As explained in this scene from Season 6, Episode 17, Walk Like a Man.
He's learning stuff, too. The shit this kid knows about computers, he set his mother up with a whole website for her ceramics business.
This small bit of dramatic irony is hinting at a connection between Jason Parisi and Rhiannon, and this is the connection that Patsy Parisi will eventually use to betray Tony. Just to be clear, this connection is abstract. It doesn't mean that computers or the internet were used in the betrayal. It's the connection that's important. In the remainder of the scene, Carmela mentions that Rhiannon is a model, while AJ explains she's quitting modeling because she's tired of being exploited. This is more important dramatic irony in that Rhiannon will be exploited one more time when Jason Parisi uses her to find out where the Sopranos will be eating dinner. Soon after, we have what looks to be a short, inconsequential, transitionary scene of Tony and Carmela eating at Bobby's funeral reception. But this scene is not inconsequential. It's highly symbolic. The construction of the scene is essential for correct interpretation. Carmela is seated with her back to the wall, on which is painted a mural of an erupting volcano. Tony is standing next to Carmela, looking at the painting. First, the volcano is Mount Vesuvius. Particular characteristics to make the painting a clear reference to Mount Vesuvius include the nearby body of water, the cratered appearance of the volcano, and the spewing of ash eruption. Mount Vesuvius, which is located in Italy, is perhaps the most famous volcano throughout all of human history. It has, over the course of its numerous eruptions, been the source of much death and destruction. Mount Vesuvius' most well-known eruption occurred in 79 AD, at which time it laid waste to the nearby Roman cities of Pompeii and Herculaneum. Symbolically, the painting represents the Italian-rooted death and destruction that is the mafia. More specifically, it's the mob-based violence that will soon claim the lives of both Tony and Carmela. By being seated with her back to the painting, we can interpret Carmela's character as being comfortable and unaware of the impending violence. Her comfort is likely rooted in the ultimately mistaken belief that they don't touch the family.
Oh my God!
Now look, families don't get touched. You know that, huh?
On the other hand, Chase affords Tony no such comfort. And Tony is not only fully aware of the painting, he's also seemingly engaged and intrigued by it. At some level, he knows the fate that awaits him. In the next scene, we see several people seated around a table at the reception. Meadow claims Jennifer Hudson won American Idol. There's some agreement and disagreement before the conversation moves on. In point of fact, Jennifer Hudson did not win American Idol, nor did she come in second or third or fourth. She actually came in seventh. The importance of this dialogue is that Meadow is making a mistake, a big mistake. This innocuous mistake is symbolic of the more significant mistake she's making, becoming engaged to Patrick Parisi, whose father will soon be complicit in the deaths of her entire immediate family. Soon after, Paulie joins the table, says a few words, and ends with "Life Goes On," as Jason Parisi is called away from the table by his father. Again, this is more symbolism. Life will go on for Paulie on account of the eternal vigilance that he practices, which will soon be made clear. Additionally, life will go on for the Parisis because Patsy decides to betray Tony, which he does through his son Jason, who is called away from the table just as Paulie says, life goes on. In the next scene, Tony and company are at the safe house watching the Twilight Zone. Collections are light, quote unquote. We're also introduced to a stray cat that Tony is feeding. Anthony Maffei asks, who does he belong to? And Benny Fazio replies, he just showed up during the big storm. The cat is a harbinger of death, Tony's death in particular. This idea is developed more completely as the episode progresses. The big storm is likely symbolic of the family war that Tony is currently involved in. There are 4 reasons why having this particular episode of The Twilight Zone and its dialogue playing in the background is important. These reasons are: 1. It provides an eerie, otherworldly atmosphere for the introduction of the cat, who shows up just as the Twilight Zone theme is playing. Next, it emphasizes the importance of the writing in the final episode. As the dialogue says, the writer is a major commodity. Third, it explicitly references a television pilot, which is a callback to the pilot episode of The Sopranos. This is a nice way to draw attention to The Sopranos coming full circle from pilot episode to final episode. Also, Chase had mentioned before the broadcast that there would be some references to the pilot episode. However, the three above reasons for the Twilight Zone episode being important are all secondary. The fourth reason is, by far, the most important reason, but we're not quite ready to get to it yet. We need a little more development. Next, Tony mentions that the cat already caught a mouse down in the cellar. Again, a seemingly inconsequential line is actually key to understanding the interconnections of the storyline. Rhiannon, a character that was introduced in Season 6, Episode 8, Johnny Cakes, and more prominently featured in the final 2 episodes, is named after a goddess from Welsh mythology. One part of the story of Rhiannon involves a character from the myth catching a mouse. While it is not Rhiannon who captures the mouse, the reference is nevertheless a recognizable component of the story of Rhiannon. This is a meaningful plot device that connects the harbinger of Tony's death to Rhiannon. Next, Patsy arrives and explains that a lot of his customers are given their action to New York. It's no coincidence that just as we're introduced to the harbinger of Tony's death, Patsy shows up mentioning the New York family. Patsy will eventually betray Tony by cooperating with the New York family using information obtained from Rhiannon. This scene is a microcosm of that betrayal. The following scene starts with a bus tour guide describing the decline of New York's Little Italy, saying, "This is New York's famous Little Italy. It once covered over 40 square blocks, but has now been reduced to one row of shops and cafes." Here, Little Italy clearly symbolizes the mafia. In particular, the significantly diminished size of Little Italy is symbolic of the significantly diminished influence that the mob has on contemporary life. In the remainder of the scene, Butch walks while talking to Phil on his cell phone. When the call is done, Butch looks up and realizes that he's left Little Italy and ended up in Chinatown. Butch's meandering is an abstract depiction of time passing the mafia by. The physical act of walking represents the passage of time. The more Butch walks, the more time goes by. Finally, when the call is over, Butch finds himself, the made man, out of place and disoriented. A bit later, AJ and Rhiannon are shown in AJ's SUV, parked in a secluded spot and listening to Bob Dylan's song, "It's Alright Ma, I'm Only Bleeding." One of Dylan's most famous lines is from this song, although at an earlier point in the lyrics. That line is, that he not busy being born is busy dying. One reasonable interpretation is that AJ is unwittingly busy dying through the pursuit of his relationship with Rhiannon. AJ looks at Rhiannon and says, "This could be a mistake." More dramatic irony. On the surface, this comment is referring to AJ's concern over his and Rhiannon's decision to pursue a physical relationship. However, in the broader context of the storyline, this statement is an acknowledgement that the relationship with Rhiannon is a mistake, as it will ultimately enable the murders of Tony, Carmela, and AJ. Moments later, the SUV catches fire. AJ and Rhiannon escape just in time. AJ comments, "At least my gas tank was practically empty," right before the SUV explodes. In addition to providing some comic relief, this line is serving to illustrate the extent to which AJ misunderstands the situation, both literally and symbolically. A gas tank that is practically empty is, in fact, a dangerous thing due to the presence of gas fumes and oxygen. He is equally unaware of the danger associated with his and Rhiannon's relationship. The engulfment of the SUV in flames is symbolic of the impending crucible of violence that will result in the death of Tony, Carmela, and AJ. Although the fire is ostensibly attributed to the SUV's catalytic converter and AJ parking in leaves, the fact that Rhiannon, just moments prior, is depicted with a source of fire is nevertheless symbolic and meaningful. There are multiple instances of fire and explosion symbolism associated with AJ and Rhiannon in this episode. We'll see more shortly. After Tony and the New York family, minus Phil, sit down and reach an agreement to end the hostilities, Tony and company are shown returning to normal life. In particular, the regular gang goes back to Satriali's. The crew is brought back the stray cat from the safe house. Paulie, seeing it for the first time, reacts very negatively and insists on getting rid of it, explaining that cats are snakes with fur and that the old Italians don't like them. Tony overrides Paulie, saying, "Keep him, he's a good guy." Just as important as the cat representing death, Tony's in particular, are Paulie's and Tony's respective attitudes toward the cat. Paulie wants to have nothing to do with it. He wants the cat gone immediately. This attitude is a reflection of the take no chances, eternal vigilance that a successful life in the mafia requires. The reference to the old Italians is a confirmation of this attitude based on long-standing mafia traditions. Tony, on the other hand, steps in on behalf of the cat and in so doing secures the cat's presence in the pork store. He is, in essence, letting down his guard and in so doing allowing the cat, in other words, his own death, to exist. A little later, Tony realizes Carlo may be talking to the feds. This is the beginning of the end for Tony. Jason Gervasi has been picked up for selling ecstasy, and Carlo Gervasi is cooperating with law enforcement in the interest of saving his son. Furthermore, Jason Gervasi is good friends, partners in crime, so to speak, with Jason Parisi, Patsy's younger son. Jason Parisi may be somehow involved in the ecstasy situation, we just don't know. The next scene has Meadow visiting with her old friend Hunter, a character who was in the original pilot and who had not been seen since episode 1 of season 3. Carmela previously considered Hunter a negative influence on Meadow. The unexpected and conspicuous return of Hunter symbolizes the return of a negative influence to Meadow's life. Hunter has turned her life around and is now in her second year of medical school, a point that clearly irritates Carmela given that she's disappointed Meadow has chosen to abandon her plans to go to medical school. The fact that Hunter managed to orchestrate an impressive, if not improbable, life turnaround serves to illustrate that while she represents the negative influence, she herself is not the negative influence. Fortunately, we don't have to wait long for a clue as to who the negative influence actually is. As Carmela says, they're going to be here, Meadow, referring to the Parisis. Next up, we see Patsy, Donna, and Patrick Parisi visiting the Sopranos. Donna tries to tell a simple joke, but fails miserably. We know little about Donna Parisi, but we know this. In matters of communication, she is one challenged individual. Tony asks about Patsy and Donna's other son, Jason Parisi, and quickly transitions to asking about his friend, Carlo's son, Jason Gervasi. Donna emphatically comments that Jason Gervasi is a mess, quote-unquote. When we consider the prospect of communication-challenged Donna navigating the minefield that is the subject of Jason Gervasi, we can't help but cringe and wait for an explosion. Patsy, acting on the knowledge of his wife's limitations, puts an immediate and unambiguous end to her attempt at contributing to the conversation. The dialogue then turns to Meadow. After Tony jokes that Meadow would only take cases for free, Patrick mentions that he and Meadow have been discussing her joining the criminal defense law firm where he works. Patrick then goes on to explain that he's involved with defending a county commissioner, who is undoubtedly guilty, in a case that has all kinds of fascinating elements, including bagmen and whores. The point here is that despite Tony's and Carmela's previous aspirations for Meadow in terms of having a successful life outside of the family business, she's clearly on a path that would land her right in the middle of it. Were it not for the impending catastrophic events, Meadow soon would be pursuing a career as a criminal defense attorney defending the likes of the county commissioner. This is part of a mafia self-perpetuation theme. Despite Meadow's initially altruistic character, as evidenced by her previous desire to become a pediatrician and her work with the Poverty Law Center, her experiences and her relationships are slowly but surely corrupting her values. In short order, she will be in the realm of bagmen and whores. A similar theme exists with AJ. Regardless of whatever questions may exist about the morality of Patrick's and Meadow's chosen line of work, the love they have for each other appears to be genuine. This is important for two reasons. One, when Patsy decides to betray Tony, he is unlikely to involve his son Patrick, even though Patrick likely will be privy to information that might prove to be useful. Two, Patsy will likely take extra precaution to ensure that Meadow is not harmed in any way. The transition from the previous scene, the Parisis visiting the Sopranos, to this scene, which starts with a close-up on the cat, is perhaps the most important transition in the entire episode. It lets us, the audience, know that we've just witnessed something relevant to Tony's imminent assassination. We soon learn that the cat spends most of its days staring at Christopher Moltisanti's picture. Chris is, of course, dead. Paulie again tries to get rid of the cat, but Tony is unbothered by the cat's strange behavior. In this scene, we have more of the explicit establishment of the link between the cat and death. Furthermore, we have continued development of Paulie's extreme attitude toward the animal and Tony's acceptance of the cat. The subsequent dialogue regarding Paulie passing on the opportunity to skipper the Cifaretto crew is further establishment of Paulie's extreme precaution with respect to death. Walden picking up the cat and leaving the room with it is symbolic of Walden playing some role in Tony's death. It won't take long to see exactly how. When Tony has lunch with Meadow, she explains to him that if she had not seen him dragged away by the FBI so many times, she probably would have become a boring suburban doctor. This is the point that Tony fully realizes that his involvement in the mafia is the corrupting force that's responsible for Meadow abandoning the idea of becoming Dr. Soprano and instead ending up on a path that's sure to lead her to corrupt white-collar crime. Next up, we see Phil's assassination. On first viewing, this scene appears to be a somewhat out-of-place, gratuitous bit of gore intended to shock the audience. In reality, it's a pivotal component of the story. The key point here is that the grotesque post-mortem mutilation of Phil's body was an accident. Unfortunately, it's very much in line with the type of mutilation that might be done out of disrespect for Phil. In many ways, similar to the way Tony broke Coco's teeth in Season 6, Episode 19, The Second Coming, by basically curb stomping him after he was beaten unconscious, an act of violence that Butch witnessed firsthand. The clear implication is that when Butch learns of Phil's fate, he believes the mutilation was done intentionally. Furthermore, he's so outraged by this belief, he not only goes back on his word to back off, but he also sanctions the killing of members of Tony's family, despite the fact they would normally not be touched. Walden was the person who shot Phil. This makes him inadvertently involved in Tony's death, and it's why he was previously seen holding the cat. Interestingly, the fate of Phil was foreshadowed all the way back in episode 13 of season 6, the first episode of part 2.
Why don't you get a real bike? Have some beach pussy to look at while you're working the heart.
Go over the handlebars, have some fucking head trauma. That's all I need. I'm 66 years old.
This was done because of how important Phil's death is in terms of story development. More generally, these types of plot interconnections provide some insight into how involved the writing process actually was. A bit later, we have a scene with Tony talking to Paulie outside of Satriali's. As the two discuss Paulie's extreme precaution in the avoidance of death and Tony's aggravation with it, the conversation again turns to the cat. There is more clear association between the cat and death and more clear illustration of their respective attitudes toward the cat. Included within this discussion is a second reference to the cat catching mice, a re-emphasis of the connection between the cat and Rhiannon. After Tony leaves the scene, we are left with a wide shot in which the cat has entered the scene. The cat, which symbolizes Tony's death, has replaced Tony. Finally, we're now in a position to understand why this particular episode of The Twilight Zone was on in the background when the cat was introduced. As I've explained and as we've seen, the cat is a harbinger of death, Tony's death in particular. Interestingly, I used that phrase, harbinger of death, to describe the cat in my very early analysis of Made in America. But because I didn't have an easy way to watch it, I didn't see the episode of The Twilight Zone until several years later. That particular installment of The Twilight Zone, called The Bard, was the last episode of Season 4. It's kind of a silly episode by Twilight Zone standards. The story revolves around the television screenwriter magically transporting William Shakespeare to the 20th century and secretly using him to write screenplays. What's important about the episode is one particular line of dialogue.
But outside there, outside this room, outside this building, is the harbinger of the worst of fates.
The worst of fates is a euphemism for death. So, The most significant reason why this particular episode of The Twilight Zone is on in the background when the cat is introduced is because it contains a line of dialogue that describes exactly what the cat is, a harbinger of the worst of fates, or, more succinctly, a harbinger of death. The next scene shows AJ getting into his new car and going to pick up Rhiannon. The license plate of the car has the letters RDX, which is a well-known explosive. Sound familiar? Again, AJ and his relationship with Rhiannon provide the spark that ignites the crucible of violence that will kill Tony, Carmela, and AJ. Even Rhiannon's last name is part of this symbolism. Flammer is clearly derived from flame. Interestingly, Rhiannon only appears in 4 episodes, and initially she didn't even have a last name. Only in the final 2 episodes was she given a last name. The scene with AJ and Rhiannon watching television at home is critical. Carmela mentions to AJ that the family is planning to eat at Holsten's that evening. Rhiannon looking up in acknowledgement of Carmela's statement is not just some random happening. This acting had to be specifically directed. This is important story development. At this point in the story, Rhiannon is the only person outside of the family itself who knows where the Sopranos will be eating dinner. The most important part of the scene with Tony and Uncle Junior is easily missed. It's the board in front of Junior. It's only visible very briefly as Tony leaves. Specifically, the board says, "Next meal, supper." Note that the chosen word is supper, not dinner. This is a reference to the Last Supper. The relevance is twofold. First, Tony is on his way to his final meal, his Last Supper, quote-unquote. Second, some of the symbolism used in the final scene has its origins in the Last Supper. Finally, we arrive at Holsten's. The first observation to make about the Holsten's scene is that there's a very strong symbolism around the number 3. We see 3 pictures in frame, 3 lights in frame, 3 Cub Scouts, 3 creams on the coffee cup, 3 pieces of chicken on the grill. And a bit later, we see Meadow have to make 3 attempts at parking. 3 is everywhere because the symbolism is hinting at the fact that 3 people are about to be murdered. Tony looks through the songs available on the jukebox and decides to play Don't Stop Believin' by Journey. After Carmela joins Tony, she mentions that Meadow is coming separately because she had a doctor's appointment to change her birth control. This is interesting and relevant because of what's keeping Meadow away, in some sense why she's not at the table when everyone else is killed. She is not directly with Patrick, which suggests that Patrick may not know where she is. This further strengthens the point that Patrick is not involved with Patsy betraying Tony. However, since she is engaged to Patrick and she is away switching her birth control, it's her relationship with Patrick that prevents her from being at the table. This scenario again suggests that Patsy is taking extra precaution to ensure that Meadow does not get hurt during the murders. The members-only guy is associated with the New York crime family. The significance of the jacket is twofold. First off, the mob can be thought of as a members-only organization. Second, the jacket is a callback to the one Eugene Pontecorvo wore in Season 6, Episode 1. That episode was called Members Only. Importantly, one of the main things we saw Eugene do in that episode, while wearing the jacket, was murder somebody. AJ and Members Only guy coming through the door together is symbolic of AJ bringing the murderer to the restaurant through his relationship with Rhiannon. Carmela asks AJ how his work today. AJ laments that he's doing menial tasks. Carmela tries to make him feel better by saying, "You may not realize it, but you are making contacts." This is significant dramatic irony. AJ is making contacts, and he does not realize it. However, the contacts that he's making are the ones that will result in the table's impending death. Tony adds, "It's an entry-level job." Sounds simple enough, right? It's not. This is an important bit of dramatic irony. The entry-level job refers to the job that Members Only guy is about to do. These murders are going to enable him to make his bones and become a made man. Time for a brief story. When The Sopranos originally aired, I had HBO for most of the first season and therefore saw most of those episodes when they were released. After that, however, I had gotten rid of HBO and didn't watch the series. As the final episodes were approaching in 2007, it was clear that the finale was going to be a bit of a significant cultural event. so I actually ordered HBO specifically to watch it. I ended up watching the last 2 episodes when they premiered. Why is this relevant? Well, when I was first analyzing Made in America, I theorized that because of this line, it's an entry-level job, somewhere in the series there would be a reference to Tony Soprano murdering somebody in order to become a made man. I thought the reference would probably be short and subtle, similar to the way Patsy mentions Jason Parisi is good with computers. Later, when I watched the entire series, I was a bit surprised to learn that the writer has devoted an entire episode of season 6 to making the point. Episode 15, Remember When. In it, Tony recalls how he became a made man by committing a murder at the age of 22.
You made your bones with that prick, eh?
Yeah.
Now Tony's life as a made man has come full circle. After a reasonably long life for a mobster, he's about to die the death of a made man, ending up on the embalming table at Cosarelli's funeral home, as he once put it. And in so doing, he's going to enable his murderer to achieve maid status. Finally, herein lies the real meaning of the episode's title, Made in America. This endless self-perpetuating cycle of death, corruption, and destruction is what it means to be a made man in America. As numerous others have also suggested, members-only guy going to the restroom is another homage to the Godfather movie, in which Michael Corleone goes to the restroom before returning and murdering everyone seated at the table. Additionally, as he's walking to the bathroom, he walks in front of the 3 lights on the wall that we just described as representing the 3 victims. In this way, you can think of the members-only guy as extinguishing the 3 lights, symbolizing their death. The 2 black men moving toward Tony is a callback to his original assassination attempt in episode 12 of season 1. The server then delivers a basket of onion rings. Carmela, AJ, and Tony each eat a single onion ring in a very distinctive manner. Eating the onion rings is arguably the most important symbolism in the entire episode. Having each character eat a single onion ring this way required specific direction. It's intentional. Consuming the onion rings in this manner is symbolic of each character receiving the sacrament of communion, sometimes referred to as the Eucharist. The origins of the Eucharist date back to the Last Supper, referenced in the previous scene. But that's not all. There's a special version of the Eucharist reserved for a person who is facing death. This version of the Eucharist is called viaticum. Viaticum is a Latin word that translates to provisions for a... I've left the last word blank. I'll let David Chase fill it in for us. So, now we can see the importance of Tony playing Don't Stop Believin'. The title or the lyrics of the song may be meaningful in some secondary way, but the primary importance of this song is that it's performed by a band named Journey. All 3 of these characters are symbolically receiving viaticum. All 3 are receiving provisions for a journey. All 3 are headed to the afterlife. Finally, there's a very clear pattern that precedes the sudden cut to black. First, the bell rings as somebody enters the restaurant. Second, we see Tony look up. And third, we see the person who entered the restaurant from Tony's perspective. The last person to enter the restaurant is Meadow. As she does, we again observe the first 2 parts of the pattern. However, at the moment we should be seeing who entered the restaurant from Tony's perspective, the screen goes dark. This is a clear indication that we are observing darkness from Tony's perspective. Tony is the first to be hit. He's dead. Carmela and AJ follow. If you made it this far, thanks for sticking around. As is evident from this breakdown, a huge amount of time, effort, and thought went into the writing of The Sopranos in general, and the final episode in particular. It's little wonder why The Sopranos is considered one of, if not the, best show in television history. And honestly, I couldn't imagine a better final episode. It's brilliant. I'll admit it's obviously sad to see these three main characters murdered, but it's also undeniably fitting. I hope you've enjoyed this breakdown. If you'd like to support the channel, please consider liking and subscribing. You can also support the channel by picking up a copy of my 3-volume set of books about the serial killer known as the Zodiac. It's available on Amazon, Spotify, and elsewhere. Links are in the description. Here's another movie analysis from the channel. This has been Mike on Media. Until next time.